Greetings, folks, and welcome to the Electromaker podcast. This is your audio version of the midweek roundup of all things Maker and Embedded and Lovely that you will find on YouTube, on the Electromaker YouTube channel. This week we announced the winner of the LattePanda Sigma competition, which is the very powerful x86 single-board computer we've been talking about. And while we're talking about single-board servers, we'll also be taking a look at the Zimablade once again. The crowdfunding has begun already. I wasn't expecting it to begin so soon. So we take a quick look at how much one of those will cost you if you'd like to buy one of the various different variants of the Zimablade. But without spoiling too much, the LattePanda Sigma costs several €100, and it should. It's a very powerful piece of machinery. The Zimablade is a lot more customizable and starts at only $64, which is wild. I had no idea it was going to be so cheap. We also look at Milk 5 again, who have added even more RISC-V development kits to their roster, some fantastic community Raspberry Pi Pico tutorials from Electromaker, and an NVIDIA Jetson Nano-powered MorphBot, which can fly and roll and walk, and will probably end up on the surface of Mars at some point. It's all very exciting. We'll get on with the show in just one moment, but just a quick reminder that we do not have any sponsors on our podcast. We don't have any monetization on it or on YouTube either. We make our money from the Electromaker store, which you can find at www.electromaker.io/shop. We stock things from people like Raspberry Pi and Arduino, but we also stock things from Pimoroni, Adafruit, Sparkfun. So the likelihood that you'll be able to find something useful for your project or a kit that you might want to buy a gift as a friend is high, and it supports us directly. And that's what we do instead of other forms of monetization. Anyway, thank you for your patience in this rather wombly introduction. Let's get on with the main show. Right at the top of the show, I just wanted to quickly mention that we have a new Electromaker Educator video out there. For those of you that might only tune into the Electromaker Show, Robin, our in-house gadget guru, who's been doing these sporadic but very in-depth videos for a while, each going into a different subject with different hardware, and they're somewhat tutorials, but they're also somewhat abstract, so you learn quite a lot in them. As I've mentioned many times before, Robin is actually an engineer, whereas I'm just a hobbyist who gets way too enthusiastic in his attic. And this one's really interesting. This is U-Blocks, and it's MQTT Anywhere, and I'm just going to say right now, go and watch that. It's a fantastic video. I'm going to go into more detail about it in next week's show when I've had a chance to actually go through it myself and really take it in like I would anything else. At the time of filming this has just gone live, so I haven't even had a chance to watch it all myself, but I did sort of know it was coming and do know what it's about. MQTT Anywhere is a really interesting concept, and when you get to the section with power usage and how much less power it uses than other forms of communication while still remaining secure, that's the bit that's going to blow your mind, I think. Anyway, I'm going to talk about this on next week's show, so I'll go now and just go and watch it. Really cool. Now we're going to take a look at a tutorial from the Electromaker project page. This is from Mahmoud M. Chile, who's been really giving a huge amount of his time to making completely free community tutorials, mostly based around the Raspberry Pi Pico. If you have a look at his user page on the Electromaker website, you will find that there is a bunch of fantastic content about the Raspberry Pi Pico here, telling you how to use the Raspberry Pi Pico for a number of things, but also just explaining some things, like, for example, how to create a low-pass filter with MicroPython, how to find heading and angle from an MPU9250 with a Raspberry Pi Pico W. This one's especially good, by the way, because it doesn't just explain how to do it, but it explains how the magnetometer works and how the calibration can be an issue. I mean, I think the library he uses self-calibrates, and yet he still takes the time to explain how a magnetometer can work in a world full of magnets where it shouldn't. It really is a good tutorial, and every single one of his tutorials is backed up with a video which goes through in detail exactly what the written tutorial is about. So we're going to focus in on one of his tutorials today, but I didn't want to get into this without acknowledging that Mahmoud has been putting out a lot of work. He has a YouTube channel. You will find it in the link to this, and he absolutely deserves your subscriptions. So on to the matter at hand. So this is a project that links the Raspberry Pi Pico W with MongoDB. Now, for those of you who aren't web dev people, MongoDB is a database. It is a framework that you can install onto your own server, or you can rent a server from them. I am not a web dev person. I have installed MongoDB a number of times when I decided I wanted to be a web dev person, and I'm not a web dev person. I never got through it all. However, I understand enough about MongoDB to know that it's relatively easy to get started with and use, but the really exciting thing here is the idea of using it with the Raspberry Pi Pico directly. The idea being that the Raspberry Pi Pico can be collecting all kinds of sensor data from somewhere, and you can send that to a cloud database or a server somewhere, or even to a server in your home, and the Raspberry Pi Pico is making all of the correct requests and sending things to it. Now, this is a two-part tutorial. Part 1 takes you through setup, and I just want to mention again, there are videos attached to every one of his tutorials, and the quality of them is high. They're well-paced, they explain a lot more than they need to. They're not just do this, do that tutorials, they explain what is going on behind the scenes. They're really good for learning. I'm just going to quickly go through the text version of it that you can find in the link, the description of this video. Part 1 goes through setup. It tells you what MongoDB is, it shows you how to set up an account and get your API key. It then shows you the code that you need to deploy onto your Pico, regardless of how you choose to do it. One of his other tutorials, by the way, is how to set up VS Code to work with your Pi Pico, but you could equally use Thonny for this. Now, the idea behind this is very simple. It will connect to the Wi-Fi and it will try to send something to the server. This is just a test. So the document to add here sends the device ID, the idea being that multiple devices could be sending stuff to your server, and readings. And in this case, it's just a set array. Now, for a real-world usage, you might want to get readings from a sensor from somewhere and send those to your database instead. But this is just sort of a test. And this is exactly how to do it. It shows you what the code is, it shows you how it works, it shows you what you need to get it going, and you should be able to see the document head into your collection on MongoDB. Now, part 2 is where things start to get interesting. It doesn't bother with the MongoDB side of it as much because that is already set up. And what it talks about here is the BME280 temperature and humidity sensor. Temperature, pressure, and humidity sensor, I believe it is. And the idea is you can use one of these very generic and well-known sensors attached to one of the ADCs of the Raspberry Pi Pico. That's the analog to digital converter if you're just starting out on this journey. And basically the idea is that temperature and humidity sensor will give data to the Raspberry Pi Pico, and the Pico can then send that data to the MongoDB database. And the code here is really quite interesting because the idea is he's given a bunch of different functions that can all do different things. So I mean, the first one, connecting to the Wi-Fi, is sort of obvious, but all of these different definitions of functions, like find one and just find in general, and insert one, so that is take one reading, say from a temperature sensor, and insert it, or insert many, so you collect temperatures in variables on the Pico. So let's say you wanted to take up the temperature every 3 seconds, but you didn't want to send it to the database every 3 seconds. You could get an array of, say, 10, and then every 10 you send those up to the database instead to save having to connect to the database all the time. If you were being very clever about it, and this comes way down the line, you could even turn connectivity off for a while so you're not using Wi-Fi during that time, use much less battery power, and then spool up the Wi-Fi just to send one payload of information and then shut it down again, which is in fact how a lot of IoT things work. Anyway, even if you're just starting out on your coding journey, each one of these functions is explained in detail as part of the tutorial. As I mentioned, there's various different ones for inserting one piece of data to a database, finding one, various things like that. This is all really interesting stuff to learn because this isn't just about Raspberry Pi Pico projects. This is how databases work in general. You're learning about multiple skill fields in this particular instance, but from my perspective at least, I find it a lot more interesting with the idea of a Raspberry Pi Pico getting sensor readings being put into a database than having to just come up with some arbitrary idea for learning how databases work, which is what I had to do in the past when I decided I was going to learn a bit of web development and never really followed through with it. So Mahmoud has really been putting some effort and time into some great tutorials. I really wanted to open the show with that. Yeah, please do go and read his tutorials, show his YouTube channel a bit of love. As always, both of these projects will be linked in the description of this video. This is the M4 Morphbot, which is a robot that can do a lot of things. And it's something that everybody loves, and this project has received a lot of love from a lot of people. Now, it started off as a project from 2 Caltech students who were spitballing the ideas for a new kind of robot that could roll on 4 wheels, but also fly. How would it do that? Well, you're just about to see. I'll mention at this point as well that as well as rolling on 2 wheels, it can walk. It can use those wheels in a walking motion if it's in a position where it can't roll them. It can even stand up and go on 2 wheels like many of those teetering Arduino 2-wheel robots that you will see. But I think the thing that most people will find exciting is the thing you've just seen. It rolled out, as you saw, and then from the floor, its wheels turned outwards, it turned into a drone, and now it's going to fly over here and then close the wheels underneath it. Now, NVIDIA have a blog post about it, which will be the thing that I link in the description of this video, as it contains the video I just showed you, and it also contains the paper that the two students came up with this. Now, what you're seeing is another one of the things that this robot can do, which is a really ingenious use of the rotors. The two front wheels turn sideways, and the rotors are used to stand the robot up. But once it's standing up, it can use the internal IMU to balance the robot and just use the wheels again. So those rotors can turn off again, making it safe to move through various different places. And in case you're wondering, there's a lot of people who are interested in putting this into various places, including potentially Mars. Yeah, NASA is one of the people who has been funding it. Caltech funded its initial research, and NASA in its Jet Propulsion Lab funded its next phase. So yes, it's kind of crazy. This is a thing that has started off as a student project that has been backed by some very serious people. The idea is as well that this could be used in firefighting and in places where, say, buildings have collapsed and all this kind of stuff. Firefighting, search and rescue operations. Yes. I want to talk about this at length, and I simply don't have the time to. So what I'm going to do is say, if you'd like to find out more about what the robot can do, I'd suggest coming to this page. Just in this very first paragraph here, in the very first paragraph here, the second link is a link to the paper itself. It's on nature.com, and it is completely free to read. I haven't read through all of it yet. I've read just a little bit of it. However, the reason that it makes sense to talk about it on this show is that it's an NVIDIA Jetson Nano that is running this thing. And if you know the NVIDIA Jetson line, you will know that the Nano is actually the least powerful out of all of them, which isn't to say that it isn't particularly powerful. So we've talked a lot about the Jetson line, the Xavier and the Xavier NX and the Orin are the new ones, and they're very expensive and very powerful. But the Jetson Nano is no slouch. But the thing that is really interesting about it is the price. This developer kit, which is the system on module and a baseboard with all of the ins and outs that you will need in order to develop with it, is only $186, which means that while there's been a lot of funding put into the research to make this thing work, from a pure parts perspective, if you were to try and come up with something similar, you're not going to be spending the earth on the CPU. Now, good luck in making your own rolling wheels that turn into wings part. That's on you. But the general idea behind this is amazing, because if they do get this thing working the way that they're hoping to, the hardware behind it should theoretically make it possible for it to be affordable for people in places where you wouldn't necessarily get the crazy Boston Dynamic robot dogs and all of the different robots that can go over different kinds of terrain. Now, as I've said, I could talk about this absolutely all day, and I'm going to try not to. Instead, I just want to finally show you this little chart from the paper itself, which shows you everything that it can do. So, it can work as a four-wheeled robot, as you've seen, just rolling along. But it can also do a leg swinging motion, which means it can walk if it gets into a position where the wheels cannot turn. It can also duck down to get as low as possible, so anything that isn't higher than wheel height, it will be able to get through. And then, as mentioned before, it can turn into a drone. It can use the thrust force from the two rotors, as you saw, to stand up, and once it is standing up, it becomes essentially, as I mentioned before, like a standing robot. You can find many Arduino tutorials for how to make a standing robot, and so it doesn't need the rotors, which again, where rotors might be a safety issue, the fact that this has multiple ways of moving is kind of amazing. And of course, all the things that you would imagine it would have on it as well, such as a camera and recording technology, means that if there was a terrible natural disaster where a building collapsed and you needed to get inside and see if there were survivors and then get rescue teams to those people, a highly mobile, cheap to make robot is an amazing idea. And again, NASA funded this. It's not just going to be here on Earth. We're probably going to see one of these things on the surface of Mars. Okay. Enthusiasm time. I have to stop or I'll talk about this for way too much of the show, but as always, the link to the blog will be in the description of this video. I highly recommend going in, at very least reading the blog and nerding out like I have, and if you have the time, get the paper downloaded and have a quick look at it. I haven't had the chance to really go through it in detail yet, but all of the code will be available for this, I think. I need to make sure of that, but I'm almost certain it's going to be released on a free license, although, again, don't quote me on that. This is the Seed Studio Xiao NRF52840, and as I mentioned on a show a few weeks ago, I think this is my favorite of the bunch. Now, there are a lot of lovely little Xiao boards, and they all share a few things in common. USB-C connectivity, which makes it very easy to program them and very easy to power them. They have limited pins, but all of the pins they have are usable, and the reason they have limited pins is because they're absolutely tiny. I stick this thing on the end of my finger, and it gives you some idea as to the size of it. This particular variant has the Nordic NRF52840 Bluetooth Low Energy chip on it, which is not a slouch when it comes to a microcontroller either. And it also has some sensing gear on it. It has a little MEMS microphone and a 9-axis IMU, or is it a 6-axis? I'm forgetting now. But that's not the point. The reason I want to talk about it again is because this is also the very first Xiao that is Amazon Sidewalk certified. Now, I'll leave a link to this Seed blog post in the description so you can go through it in detail. All the links I'll be showing you here are from this blog. But in short, the Xiao NRF module has been successfully integrated into the Amazon Sidewalk network. What is the Amazon Sidewalk network? Well, it is their own proprietary IoT communication system. It is low bandwidth, low power, and it already covers a fair bit of the United States of America, which is the only place it is rolled out right now, unfortunately. I'd love to have a little fiddle with it. But yes, as it says here, it creates a low bandwidth network with the help of Sidewalk bridge devices, including select Echo and Ring devices. As always, when it comes to talking about Amazon stuff like this, I do understand that there are various views of the privacy elements of this. All I can say is that Amazon claim that the whole Sidewalk network runs completely separately to anything of yours, and there's no way that that could be breached. Now, make of that what you will. There are many people out there that say there's no such thing as unbreachable, and the whole thing could just be a massive security issue. But yeah, that's a can of worms we can open another day. In short, this is Amazon's own way of having a network of devices. There are enough Amazon devices out there that they can create their own network that will cover the gaps that say, if you didn't want to have a cellular, maybe you don't have a SIM card coverage in a particular area, or you don't have GPS coverage, or there's no way you're going to be attached to different Wi-Fi things or whatever. One of the things it's touted to be able to do, for example, is give you better Wi-Fi coverage at home. So if you have your Wi-Fi in the house and it doesn't reach to the bottom of the garden where you have your IoT, shed, Amazon Sidewalk could bridge that gap, or it could be used as part of an asset tracking system. So you could stick one of these in a box with a battery, and it will ping all the different Amazon Sidewalk devices and give you an accurate kind of location thing. So that's a brief primer on Amazon Sidewalk. Now, as previously mentioned, I will link to this article, as everything you need to know about it is linked out of this article. There is a couple of things I would like to mention to anyone that is interested in it, however. The first is that while the Xiao NRF 52840 will work with Amazon Sidewalk, it'll only work with one element of it. I had to look it up to find out the exact numbers, but I've been aware that there's a short range and long range versions of Sidewalk, and in short, it uses BLE for short distance comms and the 900 megahertz LoRa long range communication, and among other frequencies for longer distances. But that isn't to say that you shouldn't get started with this, and you don't have to be in the US in order to actually start developing a Sidewalk device. It's just that Sidewalk doesn't exist outside of the US. But if you have an Echo speaker, for example, you can use that. That is a Sidewalk compatible device, a gateway to the Sidewalk, even if the Sidewalk in your case doesn't exist, which might sound an odd thing to say. The other thing worth noting is that one of the great things about the Seed Studio Xiao board is that it gives great easy ways to use it. It works with MicroPython, it works with the Arduino IDE. However, in this case, that is not the case. This uses this uses Nordic's own toolchain, which, as I've mentioned before, isn't that much of a pain to get set up, even for a noob like me, but it is far more complicated than the Arduino IDE. They're linked out of this article here, down here somewhere, how to get started with it. There is an introduction and all the things that you will need. In short, you can probably get away with just the Xiao and the Amazon Sidewalk gateway. It says you need a J-Link, but I think you can program via USB from NRF Connect. There's a tutorial out there for that somewhere that I've seen. Don't quote me on that. That might be old news. However, this will take you through setting up everything like NRF Connect and getting the correct toolchain using Bash and all of that kind of stuff if you'd like to spool this up and have a go yourself. It is certainly nice that something as simple as this is now available for most people to work with. There are other Amazon Sidewalk certified kits out there, but they're a little bit more expensive and they're targeted more at people who are developing, as a commercial thing. If you just want to fiddle with it at home, like someone like me, the Xiao now became a lot more interesting. So I will leave a link to this blog article in the description, and you can find this wiki and this Amazon Sidewalk page from there too. So, a couple of weeks ago we started a contest to give away the LattePanda Sigma, and I've talked enough about it over the last couple of weeks on the show, so I won't go into a huge amount of details again, but in short, it is an x86 single-board server. It is an absurdly powerful computer in its own right. It could replace a desktop computer, and in fact, if on paper, it is way more powerful than my previous desktop computer I had before I built this one. So yeah, it's a powerful little machine. It's x86, it has dual Ethernet ports, it's billed as a single board server, but it can do a variety of things. It occurred to me late in the day that this also would be an absolutely perfect and absurdly powerful robot brain. Robot brain, whatever. So yes, the time has come for us to announce the winner of this competition. We had a huge amount of entries for this one. This was also one of the first times we opened up the entries to other platforms. And out of all the entries we still had the majority of them on YouTube, but we had almost 10% of our entries on other forms of social media like TikTok and Twitter. And thank you all so much for entering. It's really nice that people are starting to get interested in the stuff that Electromaker is doing on other platforms. Although I will absolutely admit that I'm sure giving away a very expensive and very fancy single board computer is quite an incentive. And without any further ado, the winner is the YouTube user at iRubberDuck, who says, I've been looking to get a NAS server set up with Tailscale to share files with family, and of course leaving the hashtag Sigma. Congratulations at iRubberDuck. We'll be in touch with you as to how we can get your LattePanda Sigma out to you in the mail. And to everyone else, thank you all so much for entering. If this is the first time you've come across Electromaker and you're thinking, I didn't win this contest, don't worry, we give away stuff all the time. We have some pretty big giveaways coming up from some pretty big names as well. And if this is your first time here, we made the decision a while ago to make all competitions work exactly the same way. We ask you to tell us what you would make if you did win this thing and leave the hashtag Sigma. And that means that across all of our platforms, we can search for that hashtag, do a little bit of checking to make sure that nobody is giving duplicate entries. They get disqualified from this and all future competitions pretty quickly. And then we pick a winner completely at random just to keep it fair. So thank you to everyone who has entered. As I mentioned, we have a lot of giveaways coming soon, but mostly congratulations to iRubberDuck. Our show this week is a little bit jam-packed, but I did want to quickly check back into the Zimablade crowd supply campaign because it has now launched. So, as I talked about on last week's show, we're going to be talking about this in detail in the coming weeks. I didn't realize that it was going to launch so soon, which is why I want to dip back into this. We are going to do a full feature on the Zimablade soon because I am quite excited about it. I have mentioned previously, in case you didn't know, we covered the Zima board on Electromaker. It became my go-to home server just because of how easy it is to use Casa OS, which basically gives you access to Docker without having to know anything about Docker. And I've been using it as my little home media server for the various video files I have collected over the years. I've been watching The Sopranos again on my mobile phone at night, which is, I've never watched television anymore, and now I do. And I use it for file sharing, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, Zimablade is now here. There is a crowd supply page about it. You can start crowdfunding this now. They've already made $38,000 of their $50,000 goal, and there are so many different options for this thing. Now, if you didn't hear me talk about it before, this is another single board server, but it's a lot more extendable. You can attach hard drives to this, you can attach a GPU to this and use it for AI inferencing or running stable diffusion in the corner of your room in a way that isn't going to mess up your computer for hours when you're trying to do stuff. Or you could use it as a NAS, you could use it as a retro gaming machine. There's a bunch of stuff you can do with it, and it's way more extendable because it has a SODIMM slot for RAM. Now, all I'm going to do now is say this page has a lot of stuff that we're going to go through in detail soon when I have the time to really spend time on it. But I wanted to say right now, if you want to get your hands on one of these, you only need to spend $64. Which is absurd. This is a dual-core x86 computer. It's a Celeron device, so it's not going to be as fast as, say, your desktop, but again, $64. And it comes with the SATA cable, it comes with the USB-C cable. This version doesn't come with RAM, but if you're anything like me, you'll have a stick of DDR3 or DDR4 sticking around somewhere. It's compatible with both. If you would like to get a slightly more powerful version, the quad-core advanced kit comes with a stick of RAM. It is a quad-core version, and it comes with a few different peripherals as well, including something powerful enough to give it the grunt to run the way you want it to. There's various other versions as well, including a NAS kit, a cluster kit, which looks super interesting, $392 for that, and then an early bird kit, which is the which is the dual core version, but that comes with 8 gigabytes of DDR3L RAM as well. So, I'm kind of rushing through this because we don't have time to fit it into this week's show, but I didn't want to let this show go by without saying, okay, they have actually launched it. And we're going to go through all of the gory details about everything you would need to know about this on next week's show, probably. But yes, Zimablade is here. It has launched. You can support it right now by going to the link in our description. We're closing out this week's show by talking about Milk 5 once again, and we talked about them very recently because they put out a trio of RISC-V development kits, one of which was a full-on mini ATX or ITX form factor development desktop. You could get just the board or you could get it in a case. The other of which was a Raspberry Pi Pico form factor board, and one of which is a Raspberry Pi form factor board. All RISC-V, all very interesting. And they are back with a Compute Module 4 version, and I thought that would be it. And unless I'm very much mistaken and I'm about to make a slight fool of myself, there's more news than this, but let's just start with this. I'm going to leave a link to the Tom's Hardware article, which is where I found out about this, and everything else you see here, you can take links out of here. The fourth link in this, the fourth link in this first paragraph links out to the RISC-V website, which we're going to go to in just a second. Now, this is the Compute Module drop-in that they've made, which is RISC-V. It is seemingly potentially as powerful as the Raspberry Pi clone that they have. There's various versions of it, which we'll look into in just a moment. But crucially, as it says here, this is a drop-in for the Compute Module 4. It is that form factor. It is designed to work as a drop-in, and it comes in various different form factors. So it has the same Start 5 JH7110 chip that is on the Milk 5 Mars, but it comes with various different forms of DDR4 RAM, 2, 4, 8 gigabytes, along with 8, 16, or 32 gigabytes of eMMC storage, and then all of the same peripherals and in and outs as you would get on the Compute Module 4. Now, that in and of itself is super exciting, and if you'd like to know more about it, as I mentioned, you can go to the Milk 5 website. It's the first link here, and under Mars you will find this is the new Compute Module, and if you want to buy one, it is also available now to buy. It's on pre-order. You can get one with Wi-Fi 5 and Bluetooth 5, or without it. You can get it with 2 gigabytes of RAM and 8 gigabytes of eMMC, up to 8 gigabytes of RAM and 32 gigabytes of eMMC. The all bells and whistles version is $84, which is, given how hard it has been to get Compute Module 4s, pretty reasonable. If I may be wrong about this, I'd need to sit down and look at the specs. I think there's a few things this could perhaps do that the Compute Module cannot, and of course vice versa. Now, I thought that was it. And incidentally, the Mars Milk 5 Mars is also quasi-available now. It says it's out of stock. I don't know if that also means it's on pre-order. I don't remember ever seeing it in stock. This is $39 for the 2 gigabyte version as well. There is also the Milk 5 Duo, which we talked about before, and there are various things you can get for that. The Milk 5 Duo boards themselves are $5. There is a really nice looking base board here, which adds USB and Ethernet to the Milk 5 Duo. You can get that too, and a camera module that's designed to work with it, I'm assuming, simply because they're all put together on this Arachi site. I've never come across this before. This is just one of the Milk 5 links. So here's where it gets really interesting. We knew about the Duo, we knew about the Pioneer, which is also available to buy through Crowd Supply. We talked about it because they had a Crowd Supply campaign, which is on an episode from a few weeks ago. We knew about the Mars, and we now know about the new Compute Module. But I have never seen this before, and I have not seen it announced anywhere either. And so unless it's been available for a while and I'm not being smart, this is a completely new board. And the fact that it's available, it's out of stock, much like the other one is out of stock, makes me think that perhaps this is also a pre-order thing as well. I might be completely wrong about that, but yes, the fact that this comes in different specs, 8 gigabytes and 16 gigabytes, and taking a quick look at the specs just here, based on the TH1520, powered by a quad-core RISC-V 64GC C910, capable of running at up to 2 gigahertz. It is a quite powerful looking little single board computer, and judging by the pins here, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Tinker board, and maybe that's the idea here, is that it's meant to go up against the Asus Tinker board, if that's indeed what it is called. And not just that, there's this. The Vega just suddenly turned up. There's no purchase links for it yet, but this is a compact, low-density box-style, open-source 10 gigabit network switch developed by Milk 5 for the next generation of network architecture. Now, unless I'm being silly, these two things did not appear on the website last time I was here. They are also new things. Yeah, I'm it's very exciting what's going on with Milk 5 at the minute. They're really throwing things out at quite a rate. And out of all of these things, the one I was the most interested in was actually the Milk 5 Duo, their little Raspberry Pi Pico form factor one. And it is the one that, if I'm not mistaken, is actually available still to buy. In stock, $5. You can buy it from Arachi or Arace.tech, which is a website I do not know anything about. I have already gone through this and taken the gamble to try and get my hands on one of these because I'm really interested to see what it's like to get started developing with it, given the few extra fancy little things it has on board. But that will be for a future episode. We're short on time as it is, and I just wanted to point out that Milk 5 are far from done, and if you want to get your hands on a RISC-V development machine of pretty much any size or type, they're definitely worth a look. Anyhow, this fantastic article from LattePanda on Tom's Hardware you will find in the description of this video. That was the show for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for the continued support that you show me. I hope you enjoyed this one, and it didn't seem a little bit wild while I was recording it. I certainly felt like it was a bit wild because I was having trouble fitting everything into it. And talking to yourself in an attic every week sometimes gets a little bit difficult. You sometimes are not sure whether what you're saying is actually useful to anyone else, and doubting yourself in the moment can sometimes make you sound like you are rambling somewhat. Anyhow, I do hope that this show was enjoyable for you. If there's anything specific that you do like from it, you can always join our Discord server. There is a link to that in the show notes. There's a link to everything I talk about in the show notes as well, so you can see it with your own eyes. And you can always contact me at ian@electromaker.io or through any of our social media channels, which are also linked in the show notes. But for now, I hope you're having a fun, safe, and creative week, and I will chat to you very soon.